Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock in the morning here in Calgary, Alberta, Monday morning, May 3rd, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm glad that you can be here. It's one child abuse survivor to another. We're on for 30 minutes live. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I have my chat room open. If anybody's up at this time and wants to sit in the chat room, that's great. And thanks for listening and tuning in, everybody, on all the players out there. I really appreciate it, and I hope you had a good weekend. I'm just drinking coffee, trying to wake up here, and chatting with people and friends all over the world on Facebook, and just hanging out and having a great morning so far. So it's a good start to the week. And, I wanted to continue on this week. We're going to be looking at adult survivor issues of childhood sexual abuse, and we were talking about that all last week and the week before as well. And I want to continue on. We're finishing up with an article from the Awareness Center Incorporated, and that is it's called Common Coping Mechanisms Used by Adult Survivors of Childhood Sexual Abuse. It's written by Victoria Poland and also Gail Roy, and this is out of Baltimore, Maryland. And it's an old article. It's written in 1994, but it doesn't matter because the information is good and it's relevant, and it doesn't change. So you can get that information from www.theawarenesscenter.org. And it's an interesting article, I think. It's a short little article, but they list off 21 different things that are kind of common and that are used by adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And some, they said, are not so bad, and some aren't so good. So, you want to take a look at this article and check it out. It's quite interesting to see how many I actually relate to and actually have learned behaviors, have done myself. You know what I mean? So it's quite interesting to take a look. All of them don't really relate to me, not every single one, but out of the 21, but some of them certainly do. And so it's quite interesting just to see, what actually happens to people that are abused sexually as children, and what they then go on to do as adults to try to protect themselves and to try to cope with the actual abuse. So it's quite a good article, I think, and it's short but good. So sometimes those short articles are really good. And we spent actually a few days on this already. We could have just read right through it and just gone on, but I wanted to really spend some time on it because so many of us have dealt with so much of this information, with this stuff, that we have to learn how to deal with and cope with. And so I just want to keep looking at it. There's only a few left here. And so this is not a professional show. I don't have any professional certificates in counseling or therapy or anything like that. I'm just a private person who pays to do my Blog Talk Radio show every month because I really think that, there's voices out there. There's people out there talking about child abuse and domestic violence and sexual assault and all that stuff. But I just wanted to be one more voice to add to theirs and just to try to keep the whole thing going. Silence, I really believe, is the problem regarding child abuse and all abuse is really human rights abuses, and it's always kind of being silenced. Abusers want it silenced because then they can go on and continue to abuse. As long as no one knows, then the abuse can continue. And also, the public media, the public wants it silenced because they don't want to hear about it. It's so depressing, and it's a horrible topic, really. Nobody wants to talk about it on their lunch break, that's for sure. And no one wants to even think about the horrors that go on behind closed doors, that people committing criminal acts against children and even adults, right? So that's the whole issue. Nobody wants to talk about it because it's so horrible. It's so uncomfortable for most people, and unless you've experienced it, then you the ones who have experienced child abuse of any kind, it doesn't matter whether it's physical, verbal, emotional, sexual, psychological, spiritual. If you haven't experienced that, then you just have no idea the horror that goes on. And if you have, then you would know. And so what I'm saying is we just need to keep breaking the silence. I really believe that silence is the problem. Silence in the courts allows abusers to get away with whatever they want, to get away with what they've done, and also then to continue to go on and abuse. Silence in the world just says, hey, this is not happening. There's no such thing as child abuse, and there's no such, you know what I mean? This is what happens when when child abuse and child sexual abuse and all this other stuff gets silenced. I really believe every single person needs to stand up and start talking about this, whether they were abused or not. And we owe it to the children today who are being abused right now to stand up and to make some noise and start getting something done, getting the funding directed where it needs to go, which is to get communities. There's programs in place right now that are working. We went over some of that, but we won't worry about that today. But there are programs that are working in communities, and you just have to get online and start checking that out. We need to actually get more of these programs into our schools and into our communities, and get some of these children, saved from a life of horror and abuse. That is, if they aren't killed by their parents or caregivers, right? So there is stuff working out there, but it's just that it's not everywhere. It's only in certain communities, and so there's only a few handful of children actually benefiting from it, and the rest just aren't getting any help at all. So that's why we need to get the funding going where it should be going in our own communities, where groups are actually doing some really good work, and make some changes for these children out here today, and just bringing awareness and education on the signs and symptoms of abuse. That is so important. Everyone needs to know. What if a child came to you and said, "Hey, I've been abused," or "I'm being abused"? What would you do? How would you handle it? You could save that child's life if you know how to report it. And you have to report it because it's a law. Child abuse is against the law. It's a crime, and it needs to be reported. So we need to know how to do it properly, or the child can end up back in the home with the abuser and be killed, or just subjected to a lifetime of horror and abuse as a child, and then have to go on with these adult survivor issues, trying to cope and stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. And, if you're a young person under the age of 18, I ask that you have someone listen to this show with you when you're listening to it, because I fight for child safety. I also fight for child rights, and I stand up for children. And I'm telling you, online safety is a huge issue, and I would just appreciate it if you'd get some some approval that you can listen to this show. There's a lot of adult content on here, and I believe children have the right to be protected at all times. So I don't know where the players are nowadays, and you wouldn't believe how many crazy psychos are out there trying to get a hold of you online. And they'll say they're 12 years old, 14 years old, 16 years old, but they are actually older adult child sexual predators, and they will do anything that they can to get a hold of you, and they will do anything that they can to get a hold of your information, and and then they'll use it to get you to meet them somewhere, and then they will either kill you, they will sexually assault you and kill you, or they will just sexually assault you, and then you will die a long and slow death, as you try to heal from the trauma. So I'm telling you right now, you want to make sure that you don't live in fear, but that you get the education that you need to keep yourself safe online. Do not give out personal information. Don't ever tell anyone your real name online in chat rooms. Don't give them your address. Don't allow them to phone you, because as soon as you pick up the phone, they have your number, caller ID. Don't give anyone your school address. Don't tell anybody where you go to school. Actually, just kind of, don't give anyone any personal information about yourself online, because you don't know who these people are, and you go meet them, and this is happening. Just take a look in the paper. So that's why I'm fighting for child rights. I stand up for child rights, and I hope that every single young person, if you are listening to this show, make sure you get approval from an adult who can help you to make the decision whether or not you should be listening to it. So we're going to get right on here. And anyone who's sensitive to the topics of abuse, I cover every single topic of abuse and everything to do with abuse. And if the topic bothers you, you need to turn it off and listen at your own discretion. I tell everybody this on every show because it's so important. If a lot of people are very sensitive to the topic of abuse, and so if you think it's going to bother you, you have to turn the show off. It's your discretion, and you have to listen at your own discretion. Okay, so here we're going to go. We're going to finish off this article from the Awareness Center. Excuse me, my voice is kind of bad this morning. Common coping mechanisms used by adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And we left off on number 17. Actually, on Friday morning, we were looking at, suicide attempts, self-mutilation, self-harm, self-injury, things like workaholism, business, staying busy all the time, right? Hyper-alertness and awareness, and psychiatric hospitalizations and things like that. These are all things that, we could experience. They said not every single one person would experience if they were abused sexually abused as children, but a lot of people do know what some of this stuff is all about. Out of body experiences, minimizing the abuse. That's very common with survivors, to minimize the abuse. Oh, it wasn't that bad, or whatever. And that's because to try to make sense of it and not allow it to feel hurt by it. But minimizing it is kind of a form of repression. It's like repressing it and saying, oh, it wasn't too bad. I didn't have to. It wasn't a big deal, right? When it actually was. So that's the whole thing. Abuse is wrong in every way. So it's very hard to cope as an adult if you've been abused as a child in any way, but especially childhood sexual abuse. I mean, that's just the worst. I tell you, it's the crime of crimes. It does need to stop, and we need to find ways to stop it, that's for sure. So we're going to look at number 17, which is addictions. This is number 17 on this list. And it says, addictions are common ways of coping with the pain of sexual abuse. They are usually self-defeating and self-destructive. For instance, drugs, food, gambling, and sex. And this is something, even people who weren't abused have problems with addictions. I mean, that's for sure. But I think if you take adult survivors who have been abused, and then they also have on top of their survivor issues these addictions, it just makes it that much worse and that much harder. I used drugs from the age of 12 till 21. And not just small amounts of drugs, massive amounts of drugs. And I knew how to get a hold of them, and I knew what I was doing. And I wasn't necessarily trying to kill myself. I was trying to kill the pain. And so, I used a lot of heavy-duty drugs, and every kind you can think of, really. Just because I wanted to kill the pain, and just to be able to function and cope, as a young person, growing up in the home that I did. That's about the only way I could do it. Two of my other siblings did the same thing as well. And, it's hard. It's very hard. At the age of 21, I finally decided I was going to quit doing drugs and get my life straightened out, and I'm so glad that I did that. But I still have problems with food and cigarettes and things like that, because everything I do now is legal. But the thing is I still have a tendency to want to use things just to cope, right? So cigarettes and whatnot. I quit smoking, and then I started smoking again. So I'm going to have to quit smoking again, right? And I felt so good when I wasn't smoking, right? My voice was so much better. I felt better. I could breathe, and, I need to quit. So food is another issue, right? I mean, it's just a lot of people use lots of things like that. Gambling, sex, or just anything that a person does takes on as an addiction, right, to cope. And it's hard enough just living with the issues of being, a survivor of childhood abuse and childhood sexual abuse, and then you add this other stuff in there. It just makes it that much harder, right? Because then all of a sudden you have to cope with that too. The problems of whatever you're doing, whether it's the drugs or the food or the gambling or the sex, and what it's doing to your life and to your body. So it's kind of like a self-destructive thing that you use this stuff to cope, but in the meantime, really you're just hurting. We hurt ourselves again after we've already been abused as children. We turn around and hurt ourselves again, and that's what my brothers did. One of my brothers killed himself. He committed suicide at the age of 33. He was a heavy-duty cocaine user. He had lots of problems, lots of psychological problems and mental problems due to the abuse that he suffered in the home. And really, I know this to be true. I was a witness, but he's the one that fingered out my dad for the abuse that my dad was inflicting upon him and the rest of us. And so my dad really took it out on him because they didn't remove us from the home. And so my brother was subjected to every kind of abuse you can think of, almost on a daily basis, and no one stepped in. Not even the courts. The courts said, oh, well, and my mom, cried and pleaded, oh, let us keep the kids, don't remove our children, we'll get help and all this, right? So they conned the courts into letting us stay in the home, which was a really bad idea. And then my parents, of course, went to 2 counseling sessions, left the country. We all moved out of the country, got out of the system, and then the abuse just continued on. And so it was just ridiculous. And it killed my brother. It killed him spiritually, and then he, of course, killed himself. And then another brother of mine died at the age of 43 of a drug overdose here in Calgary in a shelter. And he had a horrible life as an adult, and he could not cope. And he was basically doing the same thing my other brother was doing. It was a slow death, but he was continually using so many drugs that he knew it would kill him eventually, I'm sure of it. And so they couldn't cope. So they use drugs. And me, I decided at the age of 21 to not do that anymore, and so I'm so glad I made that decision. And so I have to still work on the food issues, the cigarettes, and the coffee and things like that. Because, like I said, everything I do is legal now. But I'm just, I still have to watch these things because I have that tendency to want to use food for, in place of what I was using drugs for. If I feel like I'm having a hard day, I tend to kind of overindulge in things, and I sort of almost let myself do it because I'm like, well, it's okay, I deserve it. And then what do? I put on another 10 pounds, I feel miserable, and, I'm just not eating properly, just eating the wrong kinds of foods. And so, we just kind of self-destruct in many ways, right? Even if it's a legal form of whatever it is, it might be illegal, but the thing is it doesn't matter, you're still hurting yourself. See, so it's hard. It really is hard. And then number 18, lying. When children are told not to tell anyone, the offenders are teaching children to lie. Many survivors are compulsive liars, the abuse being the biggest of them all. Isn't that the truth? Seriously, my family, is the biggest bunch of liars I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I love them, but they refuse to admit what happened in our family. Well, actually, they'll talk about it. They'll say, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. But they will not admit that it was abuse because they don't want to have to look at their own lives. And I think that's really pathetic because it doesn't, I can't, for instance, just in my case, let's say, I'm out here making noise and raising my voice on purpose so that people will know that abuse happens to all kinds of people. And even if lots of people didn't know about it, it's still happening. And because abusers are very good at hiding what they do, and also they get a lot of support from people because they're manipulative. My parents were both very manipulative, and they had a lot of support from a lot of people. And I loved my parents too, so obviously, we all wanted our parents to straighten up and do the right thing and get some help, but they never did. And so, a lot of my siblings live in this denial, this world of saying that, oh, well, it was not that bad. And of course, our parents had a lot of problems. They will admit that, but they will not admit the abuse that went on. And it's because for some reason, they want to protect my parents. And a lot of other people did too. A lot of other people around the family at the time when the abuse was happening knew it was happening and did absolutely nothing about it. And these are older siblings, especially that were out of the home, already moved out, and they knew because they had been abused in that home. They knew the abuse was happening, but because they were abused, they went on to mistreat their own children, and also they went on to stay in silence about it, and so in turn knew that I was being beaten by my mother on a regular basis, and they knew that my head had been smashed in by her. They also knew that I was being berated, belittled, shamed, cursed at, on a daily basis, and they did absolutely nothing about it. So, to me, that's lying, and they're a bunch of liars, and that's fine. I love them anyway. But the thing is they were so warped, I guess, because of the abuse that they just thought it was okay. And even today, they think it's okay. There's a few of them. There's only a few of us left, and the few that are left obviously must think it's okay because they have not come forward to tell me that it was wrong. And that they should have, well, one of my brothers actually said that he wished he could have helped me out, but he couldn't because he was on his own at the age of 16 on the streets, And he was one of the older siblings, and he couldn't help me because he was living on the streets at the age of 16. He didn't have anywhere to go, and he couldn't take me out of the house, right? So, I completely understand that. But I'm just saying, even today, they know what I'm doing with the work that I do, advocating for child rights. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I'm busy all the time online, and they know when they see the work that I do, and they have not come forward to even acknowledge what I'm doing or anything like that. And I think it's just out of embarrassment. They might think that they don't want people to know the lifestyle that they had, possibly, but that's just too bad because I'm not going to be silent just to protect abusers and not start speaking up and tell my story just so that, I don't make people uncomfortable in my own family. That's just really too bad and unfortunate. I don't care. Abuse needs to stop, and it needs to stop like now. So I don't care anymore. I'm not hiding and staying silent anymore. And like when I wrote my public blog about 7 months ago now, was last October, and I wrote that public blog, and I knew that it might very well end the rest of the relationship with my family, but I thought, you know what, I don't care, because if it helps save one child's life, or if it helps one survivor out there to read my blog and to read my story and to know that they're not alone and they shouldn't suffer in silence, which I have done for nearly 40 years, suffering in silence, and no one coming to my aid as in regards to the fact that what my mother did to me, and they knew full well what she had done to me. They, by suffering in silence, I was basically allowing the whole world to think that my parents were these wonderful people, even though everybody knew that they weren't. And even today, people just love my dad. And, I have a problem with that because I don't, they don't know what he did to us. You know what I mean? They have no idea what he did. The thing is they do now because I'm speaking out. But the thing is it's great that he has friends and he has so many people that love him, but in my heart, it just pisses me off. It makes me so angry because I see how manipulative he is, and he comes across as this great person, and everybody just loves him. He's very manipulative. He's got borderline schizophrenia, and he was diagnosed borderline schizophrenic, and he loves to charm people. And if they actually knew what was going on in his heart and what he did to his wife and his children, I think they would be a little bit more careful about what they say and do around him. And I think they'd be careful about how much time they spent with him because he's a sick man. And he never got any help, and he didn't care about his family. And of course he loves people, but he hated his family. My mom loved so many people too, but she hated her family, and she did everything she could to destroy us. And that's the lie. That is what I'm talking about right here. It's the lie that people live, whether it's the abusers or whether it's the abused. It's that lie of not coming to terms with the truth and not coming to terms with the abuse, right? And what it does is allows people and abusers to go free, first of all, and it allows the person who's been abused to sit and suffer in a lifetime of silence and shame because they don't feel that they should tell their story because they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or they don't want to get anybody in trouble or whatever. But abuse is wrong. Abuse is it's against the law, first of all, but it's wrong and it needs to stop. And I thought, you know what, I don't care how uncomfortable it makes me to get out here and tell people my story, because actually it doesn't. I was way more uncomfortable being abused, let me tell you that. The thing is what I don't care if it makes my family look a certain way, because my family, my two brothers they're not even lying in graves, their ashes are just spread wherever. Who even knows? Nobody even bothered to even, do any kind of formal thing for them, My brothers are dead because of the abuse that they suffered, and I'm just really happy to be a voice for them. And I'm going to go all the way with this thing. I'm talking about public plaques and plaques in front of homeless shelters, and I want to get a foundation eventually set up for people who have been abused, who end up on the streets and in homeless shelters, and end their lives, people who commit suicide due to abuse. Because I want to do this for my brothers, because every single person in my family looked down on them because they were criminals, they were bad people, they were horrible, they were monsters, and the real monsters were my mommy and daddy. You know what I mean? I'm getting kind of a little bit personal and serious here this morning, but you know what? The real monsters in our family were our mommy and daddy, who brutalized and completely ruined our lives. And, that's the issue. These are not two sweet people from Nova Scotia. These were two monsters, and who had a lot of problems and did not even try to get help. And when I was 30 years old, my mom and dad were having a fight, and I was still around the house trying to help my mom because she was pretty much dying. She was very, very sick, and she had a heart attack and a stroke, and I was trying to help look after her. And at the age of 30, she finally told me that she did not want any of us, and that we were not worth anything to her, all of us children. And there were 7 of us, right? And all the stuff that had happened in our lifetime, this horror, this absolute horror. I told her, I said, you can't be serious. We have to stand for something in your life. You know what I mean? Because we loved you. And she literally told me to my face that we meant absolutely nothing to her. Not one of us. She didn't want us. She didn't love us. She didn't want children, and that we were not worth anything to her. So she repeated this to me, and then would not take it back. And she never did apologize for it either. And there's people in my family that know about this, but they don't care. They just live in this world of this lie, this total denial that, I just love Mom. She made cookies, and, she made fudge. Who cares about the fudge? You know what I mean? Who gives a crap? My brothers are dead. You know what I mean? And I don't care. The rest of my family has suffered immensely because these two people completely trashed each other and the family. And so that's the lie behind abuse. You cannot cover up abuse, and you cannot cover up for abusers and grandpa and grandma and Auntie Vera and whoever else out there that might have abused you. It's a lie, and it's wrong to cover it up. But you have to be willing to face the consequences. If you are going to tell your story and you are going to make it public, I'm not looking for any kind of restitution. What I'm looking for is to stop child abuse. We can't restore what happened to me. So the whole issue is what we can do is help children out there today. You know what I mean? We can get off of the couch and start doing some work to help these kids out here today. And so, whether or not you want to tell your story, that's perfectly fine. It's an individual decision, and you have to make it very carefully. And a lot of times you have to consult lawyers if you think there's going to be legal repercussions from it. But the whole issue is that silence is wrong because it allows the abuser to walk free. The world thinks they're fantastic, wonderful people when actually they're just criminals walking around. They got away with it. They're smiling. They're laughing. And the rest of us are trying to pick up the pieces, the abused, right? Walking around trying to pick up the pieces. If we don't, so many people go on to kill themselves, which I really hope that you won't. I was considering it for many years, and I'm so glad that I didn't. Just keep reaching out and get that help. That's all I can say. There is good help out there, and you just have to keep reaching out and get it where we find good help where you can get it, whether it's a therapist, a counselor, a friend, a really good friend. An online support group is a good idea. I really like those online support groups because they allow you to speak with other people, to talk with other people, even anonymously. You don't even have to give your real name. And you can talk to people who have been through the same types of things maybe that you have and experience the same things that you have. And then they can in turn, give you some resources that they thought was really helpful for them. And they can also say, hey, you can do it. I'm here to back you up. I'm here to support you. I love that online group support thing because, I don't have a tendency to trust therapists and counselors because my parents drilled it into our heads that they were only out to hurt us and would try to get our information and then put us away or put us in jail or whatever. Well, they were talking about themselves because that's exactly what happened. But they warped us with it. So now I do have a tendency to trust these a lot. Well, I've met some therapists and counselors over the last 6 to 7 months that seem perfectly fine to me. Beautiful people and lovely people and have had nothing but nice things to say to me. So I know I have to be able to, if I want to trust, I'm going to have to learn how to trust other people, and I want them to trust me, so I have to learn how to trust. So trust is another huge issue. But just keep reaching out for help, And there's a great website. I want everybody to hear about this. And I did talk about this the other day. I just mentioned it. But it's called This Tangled Web. And this is an awesome, awesome website for survivors of sexual abuse. And it's at www.thistangledweb. And it's just like it sounds, this, THIS, and then tangled, TANGLED, and then web, WEB. So www.thistangledweb.co.uk. So it's .co.uk. And I want everybody to go and check that out. That is just so awesome. There's poetry on there. There's links on there, resources. There is a Survivor's blog. There's Survivor's art. And information regarding, the abuser, the abused, all kinds of healing information on there. And I've only just begun to sort of check it out because it's such a great website. I just went on there and just started looking around. I thought, oh man, I could spend like months or even years on here just trying to see all this awesome stuff. So you want to go and check that out. It's very, very awesome. And www.thistangledweb.co.uk. And I want everybody to go check that out. If you're a survivor of sexual abuse or if you know someone who is, make sure you get that link to them so they can check it out. And, just make sure you just keep reaching out. We got about a minute left. I'm the regional director for Dream Couches for Abused Children, like I said before, and I'm so happy to be. It's a volunteer role, but let me tell you what, I'm so happy to stand with them and stop child abuse and help raise awareness and education and prevention of child abuse. We're on tonight on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. It's Elizabeth Brawley, the Southern Regional Director, and myself. We're going to be on tonight for an hour at 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 9 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and, of course, 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I really hope that you will tune in. We're going to be on every Monday night, as a matter of fact, and that's at http www.blogtalkradio.com. facebook.com/dreamcatchers. And you can catch all the different hosts, and we're all going to be on at the same time every night, Monday through Friday. I really hope that you will tune in. There's going to be different hosts on there, every 3 or 4 of us on there any given night, talking away about child abuse prevention and getting the information out to people. So I hope that you will tune in live and join us. And if you want to be a guest on the show, let us know. And thanks so much for tuning into my shows. I really appreciate it. I have about 4,000 shows listened to. I've done about 200 shows, and I thank you all for your support and for your kindness and for your friendship. It just means everything to me. So I want you to make sure you keep reaching out, because if I would have ended my life, I wouldn't be here today speaking out. And so I want you to do the same thing and stay alive and stay well and get that help. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.